Action. Kristy Payne, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
So why don't you start off with saying where you're from
Uh,
originally?
originally, I'm from Garfield Heights, Ohio, which is a city that borders right up against Cleveland, Ohio. You could literally walk there. It's a few streets over.
Did you stay there your whole life?
No,
Like whole childhood life? Did you do any
no.
traveling or anything?
No, we moved around the area a little bit. So pretty much, yeah. We were there my whole childhood.
Midwest style.
Midwestern, through and through.
Who's that rapper from the Midwest? What's his name? Machine Gun Kelly?
Machine Gun Kelly.
Is he from Cleveland?
Yeah, he is.
He's too young,
He
isn't he?
is. Too young for
Too
what?
young as far as like you wouldn't have known him.
No, I knew him.
No, there's no
I'm not
freaking
that
way.
old.
How
Hold
old is
on.
Machine Gun Kelly?
I don't know. I don't know him personally. But I do believe that while I was working in the service industry, I do think that he was just starting out. And I think, don't quote it, but I think that he played at one of the local music venues in downtown Cleveland, was just starting out. So I'm not that old.
What's the place?
I think it was House of Blues. I think.
All right.
Yeah.
MGK, hit
We
us
can
up.
we can look it up.
No,
but
I want MGK to hit us up and let us know whether or not Kristy's telling the truth.
I don't know. It could have been like one of those dreams that I had that you're not certain if it's real or not. But
Yeah.
I do know Machine Gun Kelly, and I love his music, and I love that he represents Cleveland.
That's pretty legit.
Go on.
There's tons of rappers that are coming out of the Midwest.
Yeah, I was gonna say I am old enough to be a Bone Thugs and Harmony fan. Every time it comes on, I can write every lyric. If you're from Cleveland, you know every lyric. It's like a requirement. It's a prereq.
What did you do out of high school?
So when I graduated high school,
Did you peak in high school?
no,
Okay.
no, not at all. Not at all. No, that came later in life for me for sure. But no, I actually got my first job when I was 14.
Okay.
I worked at a local restaurant. It was like 3 streets over from where I lived, and it was called Tweety's. And my
You can
my
say
my
so you can say whatever
I'm
you
like, "Can I
want.
name drop people?
Yeah.
Or are we gonna get,
Yeah.
like, a letter?"
No.
But it's not even open anymore. It's a Family Dollar now. But my mom was a regular there and, knew the owners, and so she signed a little permission slip, and they let me bus tables at 14. And then I stayed in the service industry ever since. So, well, not ever since, until I was about 27, 26, 27. But no, right out of high school, I went to a community college and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I initially really wanted to be a nurse and go into the medical field. I thought about physical therapy, pediatric physical therapy, but very, very quickly realized that I can't deal with blood. It's not my thing. I get very queasy and I get very grossed out at other people's fluids. And so I switched gears and went into social work.
When was the first time you realized you couldn't deal with blood?
So when I was in high school, there was a program for junior and seniors where you could go half a day to like a trade school.
Okay.
And I went to do paramedic school because I was like, okay, well, that'll be like a good starter intro into the medical field, right? Like have like some CPR and basic certifications and all that. And we had to dissect a cat. And I just remember the day very vividly of them just slapping a fully furred, very cute and cuddly looking kitty onto the lab dish in front of me. And I think it was a moment, though they didn't have any blood, but it was a moment where we had to skin them that I felt like I needed to reevaluate all of the choices I had made thus far. And there was a few other incidents while in that program where I was exposed to blood, and I just did not fare well at all.
Did I tell you that Kaylee and I, when we first started like seeing each other, I wouldn't even say dating, just like being around each other,
Yeah.
we dissected a pig.
Uh-huh.
Did we tell you this?
No.
Yeah, so, Sarah, our mutual friend, her and I, we were doing online anatomy class, and so they shipped you a tiny little pig
Yeah, in the mail.
in the mail.
Like
Yeah.
it's
I was like, when it first happened,
FedEx is here.
I was like, "Is this legal? They let"
Just shipping bodies.
Yeah, pumped full of formaldehyde.
Yeah.
And I remember, we cut it open, and I'll show you a picture afterwards, but we're both holding, like, a section of the pig's heart
Uh-huh.
that we, like, cut in half,
Oh.
and Kaylee and I are holding it
Love it
together.
for size.
Yeah,
That
it was a little
explains a
piggy.
lot.
I
It
did feel
explains
bad.
a lot.
It's weird when
It's
you
very weird. It's very
Yeah.
weird, and it lasted for a very long a very long time. The, dissection of
Yeah.
this cat, it was very long, and the smell was not
Yeah.
good, and if you give 17, 16, 17-year-old boys a cat who has moved on to the next life to go cut around in, there were some legs, being thrown about the class,
Oh
and
my
I just
god.
realized that this is just not this is just not for me. So, yeah. So then I switched gears. And I went to the community college for a little bit and was kind of playing around with some things and working. And then I decided, I wanted to help people in some way. And I really enjoy working with kids. I've always liked being around kids.
Mhm.
My whole life, my mom had a home daycare from the time I was little until I was in my 20s. She did it for about 25 years. So I decided to go into social work.
Right on.
Yeah.
So when you were going through community college, you were still working full-time service
Yeah.
industry, so, like,
Yeah.
40 plus hours a week?
Yeah. Yeah. I worked a lot
How did
throughout
that f like
school. So when I was in the community college, it wasn't terrible. I at one point I had 3 different service industry jobs.
Okay.
Um, there was a mall, like a plaza that wasn't terribly far, and I worked in 2 restaurants within there, so I would kind of, like, leave one and just drive around Macy's to the other one, and then, I actually met my husband working at one of those.
At the restaurant? Was he
Yes.
working there?
No.
He's just a frequent?
Yeah, he was a frequent flyer. He had a lot of miles, and, he actually worked at the fine dining. He was bougie. He worked at the fine dining restaurant that neighbored the bar that I bartended at and
Are you
cocktail
allowed to say
waitress at.
what bar is it?
I
Do you remember?
yeah, I do, but I don't know. We'll name drop. It was
It
called
doesn't matter. There's not
yeah.
that many listeners,
It was called
but
Harry Buffalo, and
okay.
it was a really fun bar. It was a cool bar to work at, but he would always kind of be off of work around, like, 10, and, I was a 3:30 in the morning kind of bartender and server, so he would come over with his work crew
From
and
10 to 3 just hanging
yeah,
out? That's
just
hard.
chilling, bro, like, just drooling on himself and falling over, acting a mess, and I'm like, "That looks like a good time. That looks like a good time."
If you squint your eyes really hard, he kinda
Mhm.
looks like Justin Bieber.
Yeah, so maybe that was it,
So that's
'cause
probably why.
I'm a believer through and
Oh, I
through.
know.
Now I'm flustered because you said his
I
name,
know,
not my
you're blushing.
husband, but Justin Bieber.
That's
But
hard though,
yeah,
going to school
yeah,
full time
yeah,
and
it was hard, it was hard,
when
and
did you finish community college within
mhm.
those 2 years that
Yeah, no, I kinda stayed a little bit longer because I really wanted to, like, financially set my so I paid for everything
Okay.
myself, and so it was hard because I didn't want to, um, take on so much debt. So I kind of was like, I'm young, like I'm only 20, 21. Like I wasn't in any rush
Mhm.
to graduate early or to graduate on time even. I just wanted to like really take my time and figure out what I wanted to do and what area I wanted to go into. And so I kind of, went at a slower pace, which hindsight I think did me a lot of favors other than like just kind of like I did it just took longer, so time wasn't in my favor at the
Mhm.
end of it, but it was fine.
Would you recommend that same course of action for people going into school now?
I think it depends on it's individual really. If you have the means, if your parents have the means to help you out financially, I think, like, just go for it, like, gun through it, and then but I think it's if you know for sure what you wanna do. But I think the first 2 years, regardless of your situation, whether you can, afford college or your parents can, I think that you should kind of feel it out. Go into
Right.
a couple of different things and see what you like, because you don't wanna run through college and then go into the workforce and realize I fucking hate this,
Yeah.
because then you're gonna, what do you do?
And
What do you do?
I kind of wish that high schools did more of that,
I think so. Yeah, I think that that's important.
you know?
Yeah.
And I know Douglas County, the public school system right now is investing
Mhm.
in like a trades program where
Yeah.
sophomore or excuse me, juniors and seniors can go for half the
Mhm.
day.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
And
think that that's really cool, and we were actually talking about that at my son's school,
yeah,
that they are doing that. That it's in motion. I don't know if it's completed yet or if it's
right.
set in stone, but that was helpful because I learned that I am not cut out for the medical field while I was still in high school. So I
Right.
didn't even waste any
Yeah, doing the
college credits or time.
pre-anatomy and then
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, that was one of the things that worked in my favor for sure.
So you eventually end up in social work and
Yes.
which normally requires a master's degree.
It's a bachelor's, but you could go further.
Okay, did you
Yeah.
go for the master's?
Yeah, I have a
Okay.
master's. Yeah.
So after community college,
Yeah.
what college did you end up going
I
to?
went to Cleveland State for my undergrad.
In person or
Yes,
online?
in person. Yeah.
And at the same time still
Working.
it's
Yeah.
exhausting.
It is. Yeah, it was hard, and then I had it dialed in.
Right.
Um, there wasn't a lot of downtime. I don't think that I had the normal college experience because I worked so much.
Mhm.
So I wasn't able to, like, go to all the games, and, like, I partied still, but it was very limited what I could do. And I think that that's the one thing that I regret. Like, I wish I would have given myself more free time to be able to be just a college student, but that just wasn't an option for me, and that's okay,
I don't think it's your personality.
Hmm.
Knowing you
Yeah.
in the last couple of years,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think it's your personality to just party all the
No.
time.
No.
You're a worker.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Like
a
and
workhorse.
now
Yeah.
like being a full-time mom,
Yeah.
which
Mhm.
I have to say, I always tell Kaylee anytime I went on deployment, anytime I go for work, I always
Mhm.
tell her, I'm like, you realize you have the harder job
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Not
sure.
only not only are you paving the way for the future of these children, but like
Mhm.
it's exhausting. You don't
It
get a
is
break. You don't get a
exhausting.
break.
No, there's no clock out,
Yeah.
for sure.
So when
Yeah.
you were going to community college, at what point did you realize you wanted to get into social work? Because you said anatomy
Yeah.
wasn't for you, so you started feeling
Yeah.
out some other stuff.
Right. Yeah, so just kind of took a minute and just sat back and was like, "Okay, like, think." I'm not a numbers girl. The math is never mathing for me. It's just not, so I'm like, business, no, definitely not. Like,
Right.
that's a no.
Yeah.
At one point I was like, maybe I could go into, like, opening up my own bar. Like, I know the service industry through and through. I was in it for half of my life and I love it. I miss that so much. But I was like, yeah, no, like, that's, my because I always had the fact that I wanted to be a mom in the back of my brain.
Hmm.
So working until 3, 4 a.m., like, that's not super feasible. So then I just really honed in on, like, working with kids and, like, a teacher. And I'm like, no, that's not for me. And so I just kind of, like, went through the list of, like, occupations that really focus on kids. And I have had experience with social workers in the past throughout childhood and stuff. And so I know the importance of that role. And I know that it's an easy role to get into for people who don't belong in that role. And
Hmm.
so I thought, maybe let me check this out. And so I got into the program at CSU, and I actually did, my major was social work. My minor was psychology and nonprofit administration.
Okay.
And so I kind of did that all encompassing. And my end goal at first was to be a child psychologist.
Didn't that include a lot of numbers though?
What's
Like the
that?
nonprofit
Yeah.
aspect of
Yeah.
it?
But it was easy numbers.
How so?
It wasn't like calculus
Oh,
and
okay.
yeah,
It was like
yeah.
balancing budgets.
Yeah, like, I can do that, you
Okay.
know? I don't listen to budgets very well now,
Right,
but I understand the concept of a budget.
right.
Um, but yeah, and it was, so I did that throughout, undergrad, and I did an internship with, Child Protective Services in Cleveland.
And this was during your bachelor's program?
Yes,
Okay.
and working 2 jobs.
Oh my god. Did you
Yes.
get paid for the internship at least?
No.
Are you kidding me?
No, yeah. No, I'm not kidding you. Yes, I did not get paid.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to the Something Nothing Everything podcast. Without your support, this podcast couldn't happen, so I really appreciate it. If you have a moment, make sure you hit that like, follow, and subscribe button. And then if you want further information on how to get involved with the podcast as far as submitting questions, go over to www.snepodcast.com. Again, that's www.snepodcast.com. Now back to the show. That's insane.
Yeah, I didn't get paid for any of my internships, even in grad school. And grad school, we had to do a minimum of, I think it was 30 hours a week at our internship. And so I went to my master's program was through Case Western University in Cleveland as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, at that point, I was accepted into the advanced master's program. So rather than 2 years of schooling for a master's, I only had to do one. And so for that year, I had one day of classes that was 12 hours. And then I had I think I had a random night class 2 nights a week or something like that. And then I interned with an organization who worked with children ages 0 to 5 who were autistic, had some sort of disability, whether it
Mm-hmm.
was, Down syndrome or even just behavioral issues to some degree. And I went and did in-home therapy at their homes, and then I bartended at night. And I don't know
When
how
did you sleep?
I didn't. Do you know what? I
Like,
Yeah, it was hard because I would wake up and I would either be at my internship or school. So both of those things started at between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. So I would be up at 6, and I would either be at school until 8, which I then didn't bartend the nights that I had school because it was too late for me to go in.
right.
But I would often intern until about 5. And then I would drive to downtown Cleveland, park my car, change my clothes in my car, and run and bartend until 3 o'clock in the morning, and then get back up and do it all over again. And thankfully, the bar that I worked at was closed on Sundays because that was the day that I did all of my homework. So my only off day, I sat in my lonely apartment and just did it all. I did it all.
When you were parking in downtown Cleveland,
Yeah.
uh, I don't want to hate on the city because it's a pretty
I
city.
love Cleveland.
Cleveland is a beautiful
Cleveland
city,
is a very underestimated city.
but I do want to point out the fact of like
Mhm.
the gang problems and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And
Yeah.
you say downtown Cleveland, are you
Yes.
talking like
Downtown Cleveland.
bad?
Yeah. So
Because there's that like
Mhm.
business center area that's like super
Yeah.
bougie now.
Yeah, East 4th,
But
that's where I
yeah.
bartended.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. So East 4th Street is in the middle of downtown. It's right by all the stadiums.
Yeah.
And it's a very pretty, very lit up street. And it's a street of bars and restaurants. And it's very popular and it's very pretty. And the food there is phenomenal. The bar I worked at was amazing. I loved it. It was my favorite job. Um, but I because I was supporting myself financially, I didn't
Mhm.
wanna valet my car because it was I had to pay the
It's like
10.
20 bucks.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
and
ain't
I'm like,
cheap.
"I'm not fucking handing that over. I will
Yeah.
park in a parking garage and walk," right? And so that's what I did. I parked in this very sketchy parking garage because they gave a $3 discount to service industry workers, and that's where I parked, and I would walk there by myself with a purse full of cash because we would get our cash tips from our previous shift on the next shift. And I would just have a lot of
How
cash.
much would you make in a night on the cash
So
tips?
it depends.
We'll say a good night.
A good night. So I worked there during the Cavs finals, the first final that they won, the championship that they had won in how many years? I don't know, like 1,002. So it was banging. Like it was from the second we opened the door until the second we shut them, there was wall to wall people. And during that time, there would be like 6 bartenders behind the bar. It was a
Mhm.
big bar, and we would each make about a grand. Yeah.
A night?
Yeah.
Plus
During that.
well, granted, how much are
So
you making per hour too? Was
and
it
like
service?
$2.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
okay.
so we didn't get checks, but on an average night, I mean, it was a good bar. It was like 200 to, 250. Like a slow night was like $100. So it was good money. And I was
Mhm.
terrible about going to the bank. Terrible about going to the bank. So I would just have these like
Wads of
wads
cash.
of like dollar bills just stacked inside this little purse. And I thought I was being so smart by like putting my crossbody bag on and then putting my coat over it because nobody will see the purse underneath my coat. So maybe they won't rob me as I'm prancing down downtown Cleveland at 4 o'clock in the morning by myself. Like it, you know, I didn't have the same sense of, like,
I don't
danger,
think you
I
do.
guess. I do now as a mom, a little bit.
Okay.
You know me well. You know me too well. That's why you're looking at me like that. But it's gotten a little better.
Right.
I still am fairly I have a lot of trust in humanity still, which I don't think is a bad thing.
No,
I'm
it's
very
beautiful.
smart. I have a lot of street
Yeah,
smart from where I grew up and how I grew up and the work that I've done.
sure.
But I also try to keep a lot of faith in people that there's more good than bad
Yeah,
because at the end of it, we're all we've got is each other. So
yeah.
hopefully, but yes, I did.
So parking in the sketchy parking
Yes.
garage, anything ever happen?
So no, thankfully.
Okay. And you worked there for how long?
I worked at that bar for, oh
This is
gosh,
Harry
maybe 3.
Buffalo's?
No, this one was called Butcher and Brewer.
Okay.
It's a very popular bar. It's a very good bar if anybody's in Cleveland ever.
Shout out to the people
Yeah,
visiting
shout out
Cleveland.
to Butcher and Brewer. I love everybody there. I loved working there. I was very lucky to work there. The head brewer there is a dear friend of mine, and he's a very good brewer. He's a really
Get
hard
him out here. We'll
worker.
get him on the podcast.
Yeah,
Talk about beers.
yeah, but no, for sure. It's a good spot. It's the food is amazing, the beer is super good. But no, I actually learned while working there, I graduated from Case and I got a job right away working with at-risk youth in Cleveland. So I worked with juveniles who were probated. They were through probate court and they were forced to come in and have therapy with yours truly. And so to try and help them. Um, but I worked with juvenile sex offenders. I worked with juveniles who had drug and alcohol issues, who had mental health issues, who
How do you
had
get classified as a juvenile sex offender in Ohio?
through court. So,
Well, so
mhm,
because in Colorado,
yeah, it
like
was
the
very
age, the
easy for them to get classified as a
was it like
juvenile
2
sex
years or something
offender.
like that? Like 2 years age
I don't
difference
know what
or
the length was.
okay.
I worked with that agency for about a year, so I was only able to see a few of my kids through.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, it was having boys, myself as a mom, having
Mhm.
boys, it makes me very uncomfortable at how quickly some of these boys got thrown into the system as juvenile sex offenders.
Was it like just unwanted touch? Is that
Um,
like what ultimately because I'm like pulling from my law enforcement
yeah,
experience.
yeah,
Like we would get those
yeah.
calls of like, "Hey, my son was playing doctor with
Mhm.
his cousin."
Yeah, yeah,
And the parents
yeah.
walked in and I'm like, "Why are you calling the cop?" Like
Right.
and I'm talking not like it was literally like they were
Yeah.
exploring
Right.
the
Yeah.
human anatomy,
Yeah.
not in a sexual way, but in a
Right.
curiosity way.
Well, and I think that, I think this and I don't wanna I'm gonna be careful with what I say, but one of the kids that I worked with,
Mhm.
he had sex with a girl and, I'm not taking his side. I wasn't there. I
Right.
never met the girl. I wasn't there at his initial court date. But from what he told me, his probation officer told me, his parents told me, and being involved with his family for the length of time that I was, it seems like, and from what he said, that it was consensual sex, that they were dating.
Mhm.
Her dad found out and she got scared. And so she said that he raped her, basically, is what she said. And
It's
that's a that's a
regret sex.
that's a very serious
Yeah.
thing to say. And so at that point, it's like, what do you do?
Mhm.
As like, a judge or a police officer or a parent, even, because that's a difficult situation for your kid to be in. You want to believe your kid. You want to believe they wanted to believe her too, I'm sure, and I don't know the full story. 'Cause like I said, I wasn't there, but it was just very easy for him to be labeled that without hard evidence that it was forced or that, I mean, they were in a relationship,
Yeah.
there was sex going on before, and it was, so that scares me a little bit. But I also worked with
Scares you how? As
and
far
just
as,
in
like,
in terms of
relationships?
my boys, of
Right.
our kids, and that's why I try to get, even now with them being as young as they are, I try to, like, ask permission. You don't,
Yeah,
because
it's
they
like with
get
Ezra, like, "Hey, make sure you ask before you hug somebody, buddy."
yeah, and even, like, with me, they can get very touchy, and they're starting to get curious about body parts, and
Sure.
they're like, "Boobies," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Those are my private parts. This is my no-no square. You
Right.
don't touch me here," and and so it just trying to get them to understand that you have to respect other people, and no means no,
Mhm.
and you have to listen to what other people are telling you and their body language, and if somebody is shying away from you, then stop touching them, kind of thing, just because I don't want them to find themselves in a situation
Yeah.
that could be detrimental to them in the future.
Mhm.
But,
How long are they labeled as a sex offender? Because I know if you're over 18,
it
it's, like,
yeah,
almost
so
life,
correct.
right?
So it goes away, after they're 18,
Okay.
but I don't know how well it goes away, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. So, but they're labeled that now,
Yeah.
and that's kind of something that they have to live with, and I
Yep,
know.
high school is probably
Right,
harder because
right.
it's probably limiting of what they where they can go and
Yeah. Yeah, in college and all
yeah,
that stuff, like, they were involved in juvenile court. But I
yeah,
know I know the one kid that I was speaking of earlier, it really had a strong effect on him.
yeah.
Yeah, it was difficult for him.
So doing that stuff and dealing with
Mhm.
the youth, did you I know so going back to this parking garage, did
Yeah.
anything like what
So
did you
that's
learn something while
yeah,
you were saying
so
something?
one of the girls at the same agency that I worked with, she accept because we also worked with girls who were trafficked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so she was a victim of human trafficking.
Yeah.
And I formed a really good bond with her. It was a very professional bond, but
This is a client or a coworker?
she was a client.
Okay.
Yeah, she was a client of mine. So she really opened up to me. She was kind of a hard shell, and I think, we just got into a point in our professional relationship where she had a trust for me. And so I don't remember how the conversation started with her, where she learned that I was also bartending. And
Because this is when you're doing your internship, is that
no,
right?
this was a job and I was still bartending.
Why were you doing that to yourself?
Because I, needed money, and social
I
work
need
is
my Michael Kors
no,
purse.
do you know what? Look at these nails. They're
No,
not done,
I know,
right?
I know, I know.
But no, social work doesn't pay a lot. It does not pay a
It's a
lot.
shame.
Yeah.
I work with social workers right now, and
Yeah.
um, it's almost
Yeah, it's hard.
deplorable. It's
Right.
deplorable. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like these
Yeah, it's
people are
nothing.
fixing
Right.
society one
Yeah.
person at a
Trying to.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're gonna pay them $60,000
Right. And it's
here in Colorado,
yeah,
which
yeah,
it's like,
Cleveland was way worse. It was way worse. And so I had the ability with that job to schedule my clients
mhm,
freely. We were required to work a certain amount of hours a week,
sure,
but the bar that I worked at was very flexible with me. And so they allowed me to only work certain days. So,
mhm,
like on the days that I worked at the bar, I would kind of like see people a little bit earlier and like kind of gear my day to where I could make it to work on time and do it that way. And so she had learned that I was still bartending in Cleveland, and she asked me, she's like, "Well, where do you park?" And I told her the
She's
specific
gonna rob you.
yeah, the specific garage that I worked at, and the sheer panic that came over her face and the look like, her eyes got so huge and in such a concerned
Mhm.
stare, and she immediately just kind of went into a panic and told me, like, begged me to not park there anymore, and I was like, "Why? Like, what? It's okay, like, it's fine," and she's like, "No, it's not fine, and this is why," and she just started spitting out all of this information about a gang in Cleveland that's a very well-known gang in Cleveland who frequent that garage and kind of post up there, and they just pick off girls who are walking around by themselves, in an attempt to recruit them for trafficking or take them or rob them or
Yeah. I was gonna
and
ask you,
yeah.
so, uh, two things. So, like, how are they approaching these women
Mhm.
and saying, like,
Yeah.
"Hey, are," because
"Hey,
the
you
way
wanna
I've
come to work?"
because the way I've seen it in the past with
Yeah.
dealing with, like, trying to catch Johns, right,
Mhm.
is a lot of times they're like, "Hey, are you looking to make extra cash on the side?" And they're
Mhm.
very slick and silver
Yeah.
tongue and stuff like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Y
or they'll offer you, like, if you would like, "Hey, what's your flavor of drug? Like, what are you looking to get?
Right.
And I'll
Right.
hook you up if you help me out."
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things where I tried to reassure her. I'm like, "I'm probably not what they're looking
Yeah,
for." Like, I'm not I was still young at the time, but I wasn't very young.
right.
I wasn't a
A
child.
16-year-old trying to get into a
Yeah,
bar.
and so I was I know
Yeah.
that that was kind of what they went for, and this girl that I worked with, she was actually what they called a recruiter for that gang. So she would often go up to women or girls and lure them
How would
into
that
the work. So if
that's
you
so messed up.
yeah, it is, and it's messed up because she's gotta carry that burden with her for the rest of her life.
She get caught?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
It
I
doesn't
was
it
seeing
doesn't
her when she
help.
was in juvenile detention. So
Oh, the recruiter?
a lot of yeah, a
Oh, the
lot
girl
of
that you're talking to, the
yeah,
client.
she
I'm
was in
sorry.
juvie. No, it's
You said
okay.
worked for. I thought you meant
Yeah.
like another bartender at this bar.
No, no, no,
Okay,
no.
so the
Yeah.
client.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why she was one of your clients, is because she was
Mhm.
doing this.
Yeah, she got yeah, yeah.
So did she explain how she would recruit him?
Not in full detail.
Do you know? Just from the time working?
From from what I understand,
And
it
this is
was
awareness for, like, women listening
yeah,
in of, like,
yeah.
what they normally do to try to
Yes.
lure you into some sort of
Yes.
solicitation,
Yeah,
so
so I know for the younger girls, it was easy. A 16-year-old who's walking around downtown at 3 o'clock in the morning obviously is going to be an easy target for that kind of thing. And they would send a girl, like my client, over because women feel like women are safe,
mhm.
and you can trust another woman, and girls are girls, and they would go with her, and it would be like a slow roll, kind of like back in the day with like the pimps, and like they lure him in, treat him nice, take care of him, put him up, and then they send him to work. And that's what happened to my client too. That's how she was picked up by them.
So, I mean, like, so what are they offering? Are they offering
Hmm.
illicit drugs? Are they offering
A lot of the
cash?
times it's drugs,
Okay,
and a lot of the times with especially the younger girls that they would find, it's a place to go.
okay.
It's a place to go. It's people to take care of you, to look out for you,
Because their
you
home
know?
life might not be
Yeah,
good.
exactly, exactly, and that's why I tried to reassure her with the fact that, like, I'm almost 30 years old, at that
Mhm.
time, like, they're not gonna want me, and she's like, "They would want you," and so I don't know what they would do for somebody like me, like, would they try to snatch me? I don't
Yeah,
know.
like Taken style.
Yeah, but
I just know from, like, my experience of investigating or
mhm.
being around investigators that do human trafficking,
Yeah,
it's very, very limited
yeah,
times that it's like Taken style.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
more so, unfortunately, family members
right.
that
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
procure
yeah. The
their
grooming
yeah, the
and
grooming process, not
mhm.
only for their own sexual exploit, but if they're
Outside of it
in
too.
yeah, if they're
Yeah,
in the human trafficking realm,
yeah,
um, unfortunately, that's kind of like the pipeline
Right.
that normally takes place.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
what do you think about the whole this big picture, not just Cleveland? I'm sure it probably happened in Cleveland too, but
Mhm.
the Jeffrey Epstein human trafficking
Yeah.
ordeal.
I do you know what? I don't know. That was a difficult show to
Yeah,
watch.
you're talking the
Yeah.
docu series on
Yeah, the
Netflix.
docuseries. It
Yeah.
was I'm not terribly surprised that stuff like that happens
Hmm.
and to that magnitude that it happens. And it's, I don't know. It's very easy for society to blame the woman or the man
Hmm.
who's being, put in that situation without really understanding the multiple steps that it would take for someone to get somebody else to do those kinds of things. Like, and I'm talking about
Yeah.
the workers, the sex workers, and so it's really easy to be like, well, they did that and I would never let somebody control me that much to where, and it's so easy to do. And I think
Yeah.
that people in a position of power, it's very, very easy for them to do.
Well, for
And it's
sure.
just
If you're,
concerning. It's just really concerning because I think that there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And I know Ohio is a huge hub for human trafficking because of the turnpike and the way that it's set up,
hmm,
like with transportation. And I just think, women especially, you need to just be careful. You need to pay attention to yourself, to what's around you. Like even now, I feel like working in social work has jaded me slightly. I have a hard time trusting people with my kids.
hmm,
I don't like to leave my kids. When I worked with CPS, Child Protective Services, we were at daycares a lot, like a lot, and a lot of things happened in daycares. And I know this is no shade to moms who have to or parents who have to put their kids in daycare. Um, but I'm just very weary of people, and especially around my kids. When we're shopping, even at Target in Castle Rock, Colorado, I have eyes on them at all times. I
hmm.
just do, because it's very easy. And
Yeah, I think going back to the powerful elite
yeah.
status of individuals. I think
Mhm.
so. I was listening to, it might have been the Sean Ryan podcast,
Mm.
but he just had somebody on talking about the Epstein case, and it was pretty alarming because or maybe it was a Joe Rogan. I don't know. It was alarming because I guess the process in which they procured the young teenagers
Yeah.
was through a modeling firm
Mhm. And do you
where,
know what?
remember those modeling
Yes.
booths in the mall?
Yes.
And I was like, I
Yes.
wonder if
It's
that,
so big through there. And what was that called?
I don't know.
But and you know what?
Even
That's
if we knew the name, I probably wouldn't say it because I don't want to get like,
yeah. But and you know what? That shit's been around for so long
yeah,
because my mom told me because my friend and I, when we were like 12, got
sure.
approached by a modeling
Oh,
agency
yeah.
to meet them in this hotel. And my mom's like, fuck no. And
Yeah.
I even at that age, I was like, I'm not doing
It's
that.
almost too good to be true.
Yeah,
You
and
know
I'm
what I
like, I'm
mean?
not going to a hotel with some weirdo.
Yeah.
Like, no. But my mom had the same thing happen to her when she was a kid.
So this is probably like,
So
and I'm
this
not
is
saying those modeling
no,
firms probably, I do
but
know Jeffrey Epstein, that whole shindig, part of the procurement process for young teens and some overage, but
yeah,
still human trafficked,
yeah,
was through a modeling firm. I just don't know what it was called.
yeah.
And it
But
made me,
how
when
many
I was listening to
models?
it,
Yeah,
I immediately
you're
thought
like
back
the
to
mall.
the
Those
mall.
those people
Yeah. I
in the
was like,
carnival. I got approached at a carnival one time about it.
yeah.
And how many models do you know of now? Famous models, supermodels, models of any kind that you see were from the model people at the mall?
None.
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 None. Not
Like
one.
maybe
They're like
Abercrombie and
Mimi,
Fitch.
Mimi at the Renaissance. No. What?
No, and it's,
What? And what happens to the girls that go there?
don't know.
I don't know either.
It's I feel so bad because if the numbers match up to what I was listening to on that podcast, it's
Yeah.
sad
Mhm.
that our government that's supposed to serve the people
Yeah.
have yet to any knowledge of mine progress in any investigative
Yeah.
form.
Well, human trafficking, it's a big issue, and it's starting to be talked about more, but it's not talked about enough
What do you
for
think about,
sure.
because like the whole Epstein like
Yeah.
conspiracy theory is that he was part of some sort of intelligence agency
Yeah.
used
I don't
to
know.
take these children, get
Mhm.
these elites to sleep with these children
Yeah.
and record it and
Yeah.
then use that as blackmail.
Right. Who knows? You know what? There's nothing scarier to me than a person like Epstein,
Sure.
who is a basic looking white dude with a fuck ton of money.
Yeah.
And there's nobody, you can't touch a person like that, you know? And even though he was in some regard, like they did put him in jail, he was, not alive anymore.
Do you
But
think he killed himself?
I don't
Personally.
know.
Do you
Personally,
do you think he and you the yeah, do you think he killed himself?
no,
I don't think he killed himself.
no.
I go off of the autopsy
Yeah. No, I
that
don't
says that
think
he was
so.
strangled.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah, I don't know. It's you know what? I sometimes feel like a blind cat just walking around, and there's so much shit going on that we don't know about.
yeah.
And that's scary to me. And it's, ignorance is bliss to some regard in that and to some extent. But if you really kind of let your mind run and you start to really think about stuff, it can get dark real quick.
Yeah, it's almost
Very
like
quick.
pulling the
But
curtains back,
yeah,
you
and
know?
there's a lot of layers to a lot of things, I think. And, I try to pick and choose what I focus on, and I try to stick to my bubble. I try to stick to my close friends and my family, my kids, my
I feel
husband.
like I'm in therapy right now.
Yeah.
That's
This
what
is
my therapist always
therapeutic.
my therapist
Your
always tells me,
bubble.
he's like, "You
Stay
gotta
in your
focus."
bubble.
Yeah, you gotta focus. And then I tell
Yeah.
him, I'm like, "Yeah, but this pisses me off about X, Y,
Yeah.
and
But
Z." Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's
Yeah.
like it's what are you gonna do about it? You
You can't.
you can't. You can't. So you can let
Well,
your mind go crazy, or you can just let it be.
I think the people, so there was a reconciliation of the FBI, CIA,
Mm-hmm.
all these other organizations back in like the 80s,
Yeah.
80s, 90s, when they're like, yeah, we kind of messed stuff up in the 60s and 70s by assassinating people.
Yeah.
Our bad. I
Right.
think
Sorry.
I think it moved more into, okay, well, we can't assassinate people, but we can blackmail people.
Yeah.
And what gets really dark is excuse me. It gets into this like, is the next reconciliation going to be, hey, we have been directly involved with human trafficking as a
Mm-hmm.
government
Yeah.
to do X, Y, and Z.
I don't know.
I
Is it possible? Yeah,
I
for sure.
I think it's possible, but I don't think, if it is true, I don't think they're gonna announce it,
No.
because that would literally cause.
Yeah.
I'd be
Yeah.
pissed.
Oh yeah.
I'd be pissed
Yeah.
for sure.
There's yeah.
So you ended up talking to this woman. How long did you
Mm-hmm.
do social work for?
I did it for so paid social work. I did for about 4 years.
Okay,
Yeah, just
but then
about four
total with your
years.
internships and everything.
About 7.
Okay.
Yeah, about 7.
Did in the 4 years that you were primarily doing social work, you still
Yeah,
continue to do the service industry?
for most of it.
Okay.
So I did the service industry through that job where I did the outpatient at risk youth work. And then that agency, actually, while we're on the topic, was under investigation because they had group homes that they also ran. And it came under investigation for some of the group home workers engaging in sexual relations with some of the clients. So I fucking beelined out of it. I was like, I'm not going to be associated with this. This is not
Whoa,
okay.
hold up. With
Yeah.
minors?
Yes. Yes.
So this deals
Hmm.
with what I do now is I work. I don't know what I can say. I work with the homeless outreach.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of the people I come across
Mhm.
are off the rocker.
Yeah. 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 For sure.
Some of them say stuff that I'm like, lady, you and I agree so much
Yeah.
on stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, I just
Yeah.
can't say it right now because I'm on camera.
Right. My body cam's rolling. I
This
gotta.
lady sent me, this lady that I interacted with,
Mhm.
who's from Kentucky,
Mhm.
sent me a FOIA, which is a Freedom of Information
Yeah.
request. And she sent me a FBI documentation about human trafficking
Mhm. Oh, you told
and
me that. Yeah.
everything that like
Yeah.
the local government was involved with
Uh-huh.
and everything.
Yeah.
So
It's
you saying that
yeah. It's hot.
adds validity
Do
to
you know
this
what? And
lady's.
yes, and it's crazy. And so when that came out, I was like,
How many workers were involved?
I don't know because I didn't stick around very long after that. Um,
Are you allowed to say the county?
it was
You're no longer employed with them, right?
yeah, I will because it was Cuyahoga County, so it was Cleveland.
Okay.
But it was Cuyahoga County. Cuyahoga County is huge, so it could be one of 30,000 agencies. But um, but yeah, so there was this huge investigation. It was all over the news, the local news,
Right.
and I was like, I just worked my literal ass off bartending and through this advanced program and interning and bartending and doing all this shit. And I'm like, I'm not going to be associated with a place that goes against everything that I'm trying to do better. And
Mm-hmm.
so I started looking and I actually got in to a with a hospital in downtown Cleveland. Um, and I worked doing emergency psych evals in their ER. So I worked like the 12-hour shifts. I worked overnight shifts. I worked 7P to 7A. And we worked with how many ERs? So we did face to face evals in the ER at that campus that we were at the main campus. And then we also worked with, I think, like 6 or 7 other ERs, and we would do telepsych
Did you enjoy that
evals.
more than the previous job?
I liked it a lot. I liked working with youth and I liked being in the community, even though it was dangerous for me a lot of the times to be in the communities because I was in some rough areas of Cleveland. Cleveland is very pocketed.
Uh-huh.
You'll be fine on one street and then 2 streets over, it's very dangerous for you to be there. But the thing about people in Cleveland, it was like they knew. And when I would get out of the car, if there was men standing there doing whatever they were doing. I had tunnel vision. I didn't give a fuck what you were doing because that's not my job, right? They knew, and I would get called out. Are you a social worker? Yeah. Okay. Where are you parked? I'm parked right there. They would make sure I got to my car safely because they knew that I didn't have anything to do with what they were doing and I didn't care what they were doing. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a police officer. That's not my role. I'm here trying to help your community. In Cleveland, most of them have a really good sense of community. Cleveland people work really hard. They're all really hard workers, and they, in a sense, kind of looked out for me a little bit, and making sure that I didn't get caught up in something that I had nothing to do with. So I liked that aspect of it, but I liked working in the hospital setting. It was more money.
Okay.
I wasn't kind of out driving between Cleveland. I also worked in Akron. I had kids or clients who were in Akron too, which is about 50 minutes from Cleveland. So I was kind of back and forth a lot. And it's kind of exhausting.
Company vehicle or your
No,
personal?
my own.
Really?
Yeah, they reimbursed for gas, but it was like, it was just kind of a lot. Like I wanted
Sure.
to like sit down and just have, like a normal thing. And it was good. I really enjoyed working there and I worked there up until I moved.
Did you go to any like crazy places when you're doing the street? I would call it like a street outreach, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
job role.
I saw some crazy stuff. Yeah.
Elaborate.
Yeah. No, yeah, so I accidentally I guess, naive, ended up in what would be called a trap house,
How'd
which
you
is, they run drugs through there, and it was kind of like the spot where, because we were, a lot of the youth that we worked with were gang affiliated.
Okay.
Um, so the agency, quite a few times we had to evacuate because the gang members, the older ones, we'll just kind of keep it basic, would threaten the younger clients that we were involved with because they were now involved with the police through probate court. So there was oftentimes like threats of shootings happening to our agencies. We were threatened a lot because, as social workers, you do form a bond with these kids.
Mhm.
They do have a trust with you. Um, and so we would often get threatened by the other gang members, and our kids would take that very personally.
So
And
it'd be like a rival gang
yeah,
threatening you
no, it
because
would be the same gang,
why do you
just
think
a
they're doing
higher.
that?
I don't, so they recruited a lot of younger kids
Okay.
to, to do the dirty work,
Okay.
The gang is actually, has been around for a while. I think it's only in Cleveland. I don't know. But yeah, it was a lot. And so yeah, I ended up in a trap house. I actually got stuck in that house for about 2 hours because there was a big fight outside of it. And
Just chilling on like a
yeah,
disgusting
just
sofa.
right. Yeah, just kind of hanging out. And I remember thinking in that moment, I was like, because I was supposed to go and bartend that night, and I remember texting my manager like this story. And I'm like, there's no fucking way she's gonna believe me. Like, there's no way. And she did, because she knew what I went to school for and what I was doing. And I just kind of waited the storm. I just sat there, and
Oh man.
I didn't really say anything. I just kind of like stayed in my
How
place.
many people were in this house?
Um, there wasn't that many in the house because there was a lot of action happening outside of the house.
Like gunshots or fist fights? Stab like
It was pretty much like a fist fight, but it was a big one. It was a big one. um,
just walk outside, curl yourself
yeah,
up, and just run
with
to your car.
my manila folder, like, I'm just a social worker. I'm not,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, like white
Wave
fucking
yeah, waving
flag.
around like a white flag.
I don't see anything. I don't care. Just I gotta go.
Yeah.
But no, and I had a kid. One of the clients that I worked with, he was a very young kid. He was on the younger end of the age range that we worked with, and there was this rule that we couldn't drive them anywhere. It
Sure.
was for a number of reasons, and he called me and said that he had just been jumped, and that he thought that his leg was broken, and he was hiding in a bush, and he needed me to come and get him. And I had this very, like, long but very short, like, moral dilemma in my brain of like, this kid is calling me because he needs help. My first thing was like, call your mom. And he's like, she's not answering, please. Like, they're going to come back for me. Like, I'm like a fucking sitting duck. Can you help me? And I'm like, I don't know. I need to pull out my rule book. Like, I don't fucking know what to do. And so I was like panicking because I'm like, this poor kid. And so
How old was he?
12.
Oh
I
man.
know. And I'm like, fuck, what do I do? And so I went to my supervisor, and I'm like, look, I'm like, this is what happened. The kid was like a street and a half away from where he lived. I'm
Yeah.
like, can I just real quick?
Roll up.
Like,
Skirt!
yeah,
Get in the
get in
car.
the car. So, and he was like, yeah. So I got the go ahead, and I went and I found the bush, and I found him, and I got the navigation was right. He gave me good thorough directions on where he was hiding, and I went and picked him up, and in my car he went, and I rescued him from further.
Oh my.
He did not break his leg, which was a positive. And I convinced him to file a police report, which I don't, and that's the other thing too, is when you're working with these kids, you want to do the right thing and you want to teach them and encourage them to follow the law and do things
Mhm.
the right way. But you also have to understand in their situation, there's like street code,
Oh, yeah.
and like that can get you really
And
hurt.
get you killed.
Correct. So it's like, you know, you don't really know what to do.
Mhm.
And
Because if you start coming at them, so working in Durham, North Carolina, I dealt with a significant amount of gangs.
yeah,
So it was 8
it's
Tray, 9
hard.
Tray, G Shine, and O Block
Yeah.
were kind of the main ones that we dealt with, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you would get their little. Did you ever look at their gang book?
No.
So they hold that near and dear. So if you
Yeah.
can get your hands on it, it's
Mhm.
like gold.
Gold.
It's
Yeah.
gold to
Yeah.
police
See, I don't
officers.
want to know that shit. I'm like,
Yeah. So, but you start coming at them sideways, and you're telling
Mhm.
them like, "Hey, man, listen, like, I was dealing with a lot of gunshot wounds, and I
Yeah.
was like, hey, who did it? I ain't telling you,
Yeah.
you know."
Yeah. Right.
And it's like, dude, you might die. The only
Yeah.
person that ever
Yeah.
told me who shot him was a dude that got shot in the forehead. I showed up to the gas station. I'm like, oh, like DRT, dead right there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because his eyes are open. He's just kind of doing like this, like
He's
shocked face.
alive?
I walked up and I aired. I said, "Hey, I got one gunshot wound to the head.
Yeah.
Send EMS." And the guy, or I said something like, it like whatever 10 code it was, like dead right there or something like that.
Yeah.
And the guy looked at me and like, if you deal with people, like people
Yeah.
think they're all sneaky with 10 codes. If you
Mhm.
deal with frequent flyers, they
Yeah.
know our 10 code.
Right.
So
Right.
it's
Oh
like you might as
yeah.
well just
Yeah.
say it in plain English.
Right.
So I remember the guy looked at me like, it's like his soul,
He's like,
like
I'm
his
not
soul
dead.
went back into his
Yeah.
body, and he's like, "I ain't dead."
You're like,
And
oh.
I literally, I stumbled, I like dropped, it,
Oh
yeah, freaked me
my
out.
god.
And I was like, "Who did this?" And he's like, "So and so." And I was
Yeah.
like,
He's like, I'm where's my
I was getting
pen?
my pen, I was getting my notepad. Like,
Hold on.
say that again.
Just
And like,
another minute.
meanwhile, I have body
Yeah.
cameras, so I was like, worst
Right.
comes to worst, I can rewind it.
Yeah.
But I
He's
was like,
like, I'm
and I'm
taking
like, I'm
I'm
writing
burning the
down.
house down before I die.
Oh my god! Well, he died on the
Yeah.
way. So he loaded
We
up in
took
the
the house
EMS.
down while before he
Yeah,
went
he
out.
loaded up in the EMS. They transported him to Duke, and on the way to Duke, he was pronounced dead because of
Aww.
so he got shot with a 22, and it got lodged in his brain, and because of the swelling.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's amazing to me how um so when I was at the working at the hospital,
Mhm.
we had a lot of patients that would come in with self-inflicted gunshot
To
wounds.
the legs.
No, it was kind of mind-blowing to me because in my brain, if you get shot or shoot yourself in the head, like you're dead,
Mhm.
right? I couldn't believe how many people survived a gunshot wound to
The dome.
their dome. Yeah.
Yeah. It gets dark,
I
but
know, but I was like, wow, like that. And because we had a lot. There was a lot.
yeah, yeah, it's
There
really
was a
sad. I
lot.
deal with
It's
that's like
terrible.
everyone people ask me from time to time like, hey, what's the hardest stuff that you face in
Yeah.
this job? And like people normally think it's like going to a gunshot wound or something like
Mhm.
that, and it's
The
not.
ones who do that because
The
they're
ones who self-inflict
yes,
are really hard.
yes, and it's hard because the one thing that has there's a lot of things that have stuck with me doing that kind of work, but I remember one of the other workers that was on my team, she did everything for so long. Like
Hmm.
she had just been in that field for so long. She knew everything. And I really looked up to her, and she told me the one time, she's like, there is a very, very small percentage of people who will actually try to kill themselves. She's
Hmm.
like, a lot of people will feel suicidal and will
Call.
yeah,
Oh
and
yeah.
will, have a plan and
Yeah.
they'll really work, but they won't actually do it.
Yeah.
So she's like, it goes against all human nature
Yeah. And a lot of times like
to do that.
the people that survive are the ones that flinch.
Yeah, yeah, we're
Right.
correct because
Or
it'll
yeah.
move. Yeah.
Yeah. I won't give any tips, but what I will, like, as far as like
how to do it.
Yeah, like
No.
the
No.
successful ones versus the non.
Right, yeah.
But
Yeah.
what I'll say before we take a quick break, because I have to go potty.
Potty
Um,
break.
you know, I encourage people that are feeling down
Yes.
to at least think about talking to somebody about it.
Mhm.
You know, it's very easy for somebody in, my situation is very stable right now,
Yeah.
very right of mind.
Yeah.
I've been in dark places in the past, and I'm telling you that if you just, even if it's nonchalant, not specific or anything, but if you have a coworker you trust, a significant other, or
Anybody.
somebody,
Yeah.
just, or even a bartender, just
Somebody.
somebody,
Yeah.
just drop that little nugget.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm telling you,
There's a lot of people who, even if they don't know that person, that would care and
oh
that
yeah,
do care.
oh yeah,
There's a lot of
yep,
people that care, and there's a lot of different avenues to take rather than that one,
yeah.
to where you can get better for
Yeah,
sure.
and on that we'll end
With
for
a potty
this
break.
with a potty break,
Potty
and then
break.
we'll jump into the next section. Okay,
Whoop.
cool.
Deal.
Coming up next on the Something Nothing Everything podcast.
And we were just kind of like going through the motions. He was, starting up his career. I was starting up mine, and we had this house and we had our dogs, and everything was good and good and good. And then I got pregnant. If I would have went home, the chances of him dying were very high. If I would have tried to deliver him naturally or vaginally,
Yeah,
the chances of him dying and me were very high. And I remember hearing my son cry, and I felt this sense of peace come over me for about 2 seconds because I knew that he was okay. And then the panic kicked back in.